Again, thank you for being here at our final session of our webinar series, Advancing Talent Systems. Today, we're really looking forward to showcasing Daniel's talent solutions. They're going to talk to us about placing leaders in the PvP space based on experiences and lessons we've learned through Talent Well these past couple of years. Before we get started, I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are, Catalyst Exchange, and what Talent Well actually is. I know some of you, most of you actually have been at our webinar series, so this might feel a little bit repetitive, so I'll go quick. But Catalyst Exchange, we're a national nonprofit and we support mission-driven organizations across the education and social impact sector to build their capacity. And we do that by connecting them to expertise, tools, and hands-on support for transformational outcomes. And we do have a model, and we use that model to help organizations solve their challenges, build internal capacity, and lead sustainable change. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that actually looks like right here. Um, so, what is talent? Well, at Catalyst Exchange, we have collaborated with the Balmer Group to create a one-stop shop for PBPs to get targeted talent and HR support. So, we launched what we call Talent Well 2 years ago in April 2024. And the goals of this particular service was to elevate the importance of talent strategy, help organizations strengthen talent practices, connect organizations to the right consulting support, build a diverse network of search and talent consultants, and generate real-time insights and data on the talent needs that were surfacing. And we did that via our Talent Well model here. So we helped organizations take a diagnostic to identify their strengths and areas of growth, go through some action planning that would support them over the course of 2 years, and match them to consultants like Daniel's Talent Solutions, who you'll hear from today. And we did that. We supported that work with consulting wallet. So the budgets were subsidized from Balmer, and the orgs contributed themselves as well. And over the past 2 years, we've learned and accomplished a lot. So, first and foremost, we learned a lot after folks took the diagnostic, and we surfaced that talent systems, more often than not, are more fragmented rather than strategic. And we also learned that leadership and workforce planning were really critical constraints on performance. And as a result, our project demand reflected those needs. So, we were really focused on building core talent infrastructure so that our efforts were more proactive rather than reactive. And then we also helped organizations strengthen leadership through projects that focus on coaching, development, and succession planning, just to name a few. And what did that work actually look like? On the right here, you'll see that we had some top focus areas that folks dived into. So we were really focusing first and foremost on talent strategy, org design, and workforce planning. After that, a lot of folks focused on searches, leadership development, talent development, and people operations. I'm going to talk a little bit about what specifically that looked like, but overall, we supported 28 organizations across 17 states and all four regions. So we had a lot of work going on all over the country. And overall, we had 118 capacity building projects with 86 providers. So the average, or yes. Some examples of that looked like folks taking on some org design projects. We had folks looking for chief program officers, directors of education, data analysts, just to name a few roles. And then we had a handful of folks focusing on compensation analyses and market analyses, coaching, just to name a few. This slide gives you a sense of what folks were actually taking on. And the impact was very deep. So our partners were very appreciative of the support. And ultimately, they were able to go from very proactive to reactive talent structures and systems. And so folks like Focus Community Strategies at the bottom, they say staff now understand the why behind a lot of the work that they do specific to talent. So remember, these folks also contributed themselves, so there was a lot of investment all around as well. Same thing for our providers. As we said, there were, well, I guess I didn't say this, but there were some providers who got to do some really deep work over the past 2 years throughout their projects. So they were really able to see those organizations transform their talent systems and help them get equipped with all the tools and operations that they needed to achieve their long-term outcomes. All right. Now that we've talked a little bit about who we are, we're going to pass the baton to Daniel's Talent Solutions. They are a lovely consulting firm in our provider network. They've been a member since 2024, and they had the opportunity to support several of our Talent Well partners with searches, leadership programs, and things of the like. But their consulting firm is a they support mission-driven organizations in a variety of talent areas listed here. And today we are really happy to co-host with Yanika Daniels, who's the founder and CEO of Daniels Talent Solutions, and Keisha Pierce, who is their amazing search consultant. Thank you all for being here. Again, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to them to talk a little bit more about placing leaders in the PBP space.
Thank you so much, Seema, and thank you to the Catalyst Ed Exchange team. We're excited to have this conversation with you all today. You all are here to talk a little bit about placing leaders. We had the opportunity to place, as Seema said, a number of different roles, including CEO roles, for the Talent Exchange or Talent Well. We are an organization. Overall, we really want to help create diverse workspaces, equitable workspaces that foster personal fulfillment and growth for professionals. And so we've been supporting Catalyst Exchange since 2021, and then since 2024, been a part of the Talent Well. We have a team of seasoned human resource professionals, and we pride ourselves in a customized hands-on approach. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our framework as well today. That's a little bit about who we are. Unica Daniels, I actually founded the organization in 2016, and so this is our 10 year. And as Seema said, we focus kind of in three areas: executive search and recruitment, also HR strategy and leadership development. And I will pass it to Keisha as well so she can introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for your time today and joining us. My name is Keisha Pierce. I am a recruitment consultant. I have been working with Unica and Daniel's Talent Solutions since 2024, actually starting off with some of the projects that we got from Talent Well, and it has been an amazing experience. I work typically with executive search, but you find me doing some other projects as needed, as the needs for organizations changed. And like stated earlier today, talent systems are sometimes fragmented. And so we like to find ways to make sure that we have strategies and plans to help make a more seamless process for both the candidates and for the search committees that we work with. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. I didn't give y'all a roadmap. So we're gonna talk a little bit about some of our common experiences, specifically in hiring leaders in the place-based partner space. We then will do a little case study and talk about one of, I guess, the recipients of Talent Well, Renaissance West Community Initiative, and one of their board members is joining us to talk a little bit about that process, and then we'll wrap up a little bit. And maybe if we have time to ask you a little bit about your hiring strategies, we'll do that. So for us as recruiters in this field, and we've been doing this for a while, when we initially have conversations with organizations, providers, those conversations, sometimes there are some red flags that pop up. And so I just wanted to highlight a few things that start to go off for us as we're having conversations with you. And these are things to just think about before you even jump into the hiring space. And so a few of these things, I won't read all of them, but I'll highlight a few of them. So if we're talking to a board of directors and they're telling us that, hey, we just need somebody who's exactly like our previous CEO, then for us, that might tell us, have they really thought about what the future looks like for the organization? Or are they just simply trying to like find somebody, a new body in that seat so that they can kind of keep the work going? Sometimes we also hear people say, hey, we need somebody that can start immediately. And that might tell us that maybe the board hasn't really thought about an interim plan. Maybe they haven't really thought about expectations or timelines. And also how you really think about curating a talent pipeline that will walk into something that is sustainable for them. We then sometimes we'll hear people say, we're the strategic plan is kind of in process, or we're still using one that was from 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And so as recruiters, what that tells us is we're not quite sure you have a clear roadmap of what you need now and where you're going into the next 3 to 5 years. So these are just some things that we're thinking about. We're trying to make sure that you as a hiring manager or as a board of directors, you're clear on what the work actually is. You're clear on what are the key competencies that you need for a leader or a new member of your team to be able to fulfill. We're trying to make sure you're not over scoping. And so when you tell us that, hey, we need somebody who can do everything, then that
Mhm.
tells us you haven't prioritized. And so you might be over scoping the role. And candidates can read that and see that, especially at our executive leadership level. And the last thing is, are you taking the time to really thoughtfully think about what's the long-term goal versus the immediate operational need that you have? So these are just a few things that we found in our experience that give us some red flags, but also tell us that, hey, we might need to pause and have some really great conversations with you as a hiring manager or as a board of directors. Let's go to the next one, Kara. And I was like, do we need this? You know, we always love some data. And this comes from the most recent Gallup survey for 2024. And so why effective hiring is exactly your org strategy. You all know it. Y'all are talent members, right? You know that the leader matters. But also 70% of the variance of employee engagement is directly tied to managers. And so you can do a lot of things in your organization, but a big majority of an employee's engagement, how they show up to work, how they are clear about expectations is directly tied to the leader in that organization. So that could affect your turnover, productivity, increased absenteeism, which is kind of hard now in this remote work. Any days kind of off, right? We're offering, we want you to be accountable. And then in the space that we're all in, right, you see the burnout, or you even see kind of reduced morale. I think in today's climate, everyone is like stressed. The data also, or the research also shows us that 1 in 2 employees leave a job. Likely they stay or leave because of the manager. And so people get into this work because of the impact. They leave this work because of the management. And then 30% of first year earnings are lost when you make the wrong hire. We all know this, right? We want to make sure that it's the right person. But then if that person leaves in 3 months and 6 months, you as a nonprofit, as a PBP, as a mission-driven organization, then you're missing out on what that money could have been used for other things, right? Or grant opportunities, delayed initiatives. So just re-emphasizing the importance of this hiring process. So we were asked also to talk a little bit about place-based partners, and some of you may be working in place-based space or looking to work in place-based space. And so there are a couple of things that I wanted to emphasize that might be different to keep in mind versus other hiring that we might do. For place-based partners, there are a couple of things we like to emphasize. One is that there is a local focus, right? And so there are a few different models out there, from the purpose-built model to the strive together to various models out there. But all of them are really thinking about the neighborhood that they're investing in, thinking about how to wrap your hands around a full zip code, a couple of zip codes, and uplift that zip code. And so there is a hyper focus on the locality, the community, the people that the place-based partner organization is supporting. There's also a lot of cross-sector collaboration. And so in this space, right, from place-based, you're working with education, healthcare, wellness. You're thinking about economic mobility. You may be working with the city. And so there's kind of this cross-sector collaboration, which also needs leaders who can think at a systemic level. So thinking kind of not just what the organization can do, but also thinking about fundraising and policy and things that can really um, not just kind of what's happening, but what are the symptoms or the causes of what's happening within an organization. And then the last thing is community ownership. Community ownership is really important because we are not here, right, to do things to a community, right? We
Mhm.
are trying to work in collaboration, co-designing with residents and community members. And so that voice becomes really, really important. And so this kind of affects hiring in a couple of different ways. But one, when you're thinking about who's the leader that you need within that organization, you're also thinking about we hear a lot of times, do we want someone who is from this area? Because the locality piece is really important. And so it may not be that your leader is exactly from the organization, but they have to be familiar with the communities, the types of issues, the types of needs that the specific neighborhoods and communities have, and have some type of engagement and understanding with that. And so that's really important when you're thinking about place-based hiring. All right. So we're going to give you a little bit of insight into how we think about hiring, and maybe that's something that you can kind of take back to your teams as well. So we are fans of frameworks. So ours that we have subscribed to is the people process technology. And so anything that we do, especially in hiring or anything around talent, we're thinking about, who's involved, what's the process, and what are the tools and technology we're using. And so, specifically for hiring, when we think about the people domain, we're thinking about who you hire and who you develop matters specifically. So, in your process, have you and your board thought about the key competencies that are needed for now and the future? And not just saying, hey, everyone wants the unicorn, but we need somebody who can do everything, but really specifically thinking about where's your organization going in the next 3 to 5 years, and what are the specific competencies that you need? We think about your community, the voice, and how that's going to be involved. Are the values aligned to you and your organization? Also, when you're thinking about the people, what's the growth potential, right? So people get into organizations that they can lead them and transform them, but they also want to know how they can grow. The process aspect of it really thinks about your interview process. Are your interviews structured? Are you having a lot of different stakeholders at the table? So we never want one or two folks to help make a hiring decision, right? Especially in place-based partnership, we're thinking about our community voices involved, the full board. Your candidates also want to be able to see multiple people at the organization. They don't just want to see the HR person or the hiring manager. They want to also assess you and assess, is this the right thing for them? What type of assessment methods are you using? So rubrics and things that for us minimize bias. So let's make sure we're scoring on a rubric that everybody is calibrated and really understands who and what we're looking for. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but you're also thinking about what's the process for the candidate's experience. We're talking about timing, right? I've heard we don't do this, but I've heard CEO searches that take a year or 6 months or 8 months. What is the candidate experiencing and why is it taking that long? These are all process issues. And then lastly, technology. Thinking about, how are you going to make your decisions? Are they data informed decisions? We're all using applicant tracking systems. AI has become a big thing. What's your policy behind that? And how are you utilizing it when you're looking at different candidates now that these systems offer AI tracking and AI generated numbers? So this is what we think about when we approach hiring, the people that are involved, who we want to hire, the process behind how we're taking candidates from A to B and trying to complete our hiring processes. For executives, for us, is usually 3 to 4 months. And making sure that we're running a tight process in that. And then what are the tools that we're using? All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Keisha, and she's going to give her firsthand experience on some lessons and then engage us in a conversation about Renaissance West community.
Thank you so much, Shanika. I realized that we got the opportunity to introduce ourselves before I launch into these lessons. If you don't mind to hop into the chat, let me know who you are, where you are, and sort of what is your connection? Are you in a place-based community? Are you part of a board? Like, I want to make sure that when I'm giving these lessons, they're in the perspectives of the great group that we have here today. So just if you don't mind, just drop some things in the chat. I'll give it a minute and then I'll go into the lessons. Thank you, Kara. Thank you, Becky, Bryce. I'm seeing people coming in now. Okay, great. So we do have people who are part of, let's see. I see a couple with place-based partnerships. That's very exciting. Some leadership development coming from different areas of talent. That's great. Still keep responding. Also, hi, Michelle. Good to see you. So let me just tell you a little bit about my work. So I work, like I said, in executive search, and it it continues to change and evolve in some ways that are really exciting, and some ways that are backed by sort of what does the jobs look like, the job opportunities look like, and how that has changed based on funding. Here's the four biggest lessons that I have. One, it is very crucial to define what success looks like before you start talking about, oh, I want them to go to this school, or I want them to have this background, or I want them to have, 25 years of some type of experience. It's really important to sit down and say, okay, here's the role. What's happening right now in your organization, and what kind of competencies, experience, qualities do you need for this person to be successful? And it's funny because you hear all type of things. Sometimes I hear, like more recently, they were looking for someone who was firm, right? They had some tough decisions, some tough conversations coming up, and they needed someone that they felt like it wasn't going to be sort of like a friend, but was going to be someone who can have these tough decisions and feel like they were honored and respected based off of the work that they decided to do hand in hand. So that's hugely important. We hear a lot, and people do come to us from an equity standpoint. Like, where do we make sure that we're getting a diverse pipeline? And it's important to have equity embedded in all parts of the process. This is the job description, making sure that the language is inclusive. This is making sure that we're doing blind applications. So as we're reviewing everybody, we're not looking up names, we don't see faces, we don't know anything but what's the paper there. And then making sure that continues as we go throughout the process. I think recently I remember somebody was applying for something and they said, oh, I know someone there. Should I ask them? Should I call them and see what they know about them? And I was like, absolutely not. At this point in the process, all we need to know is what's on their resume. And that's what we need to hear from the person, hopefully, and not the AI that might be reforming, reformatting what they're saying, but making sure that we have the opportunity to have everyone start from the same blank slate of the resume. Training and collaborating consistently. What happens sometimes is we have a search committee, and there might be 4, 5, 6 people that are part of the committee. Everyone comes to the table with different perspectives. And so it's important that for our team, we have a meeting where we connect. Here is where we are at. Here is what we are looking for. Here is how we fill out a rubric. We don't speak about it before the rubric because there's so much bias that can get into a selection before we even have that debrief conversation. So, how do we make sure that we're trying to mitigate any bias that gets in the process? So, that's that equity throughout the process again. And so we do pre-training videos, we do pre-training conversations, we set up the debrief and say, here is how we're going to have a conversation to make sure that we can maximize the details and the perspectives in the room. And that way, when we have the conversations, we're all moving in the same direction to a consensus that can help us really find the candidate that brings out the most qualities that are necessary for this role. Yanika mentioned earlier about candidate experience. So that's why we say retention starts during recruitment. We've heard these stories about people who are like, okay, I did, 2 interviews and then I had to start chasing the hiring manager. What happened? What are we doing? So it's really important that we give one, a roadmap. This is what it's going to look like. And be consistent in our communications and also recognize that this is a really human element. The people who are applying for this role, this is their lives and their livelihood. So, like making sure that we're being consistent with our communication, making sure that if we can offer feedback in any way to help them to do better in the next stages, and, if something is to happen because we are humans and we have lots of busy schedules, that we are able to really quickly connect with them and understand and make a plan for moving forward. For place-based partnerships specifically and nonprofits, really assessing current state and future state has been crucial in the work that we're doing. Really understanding, okay, where are we at today? Where are the pain points? What are we looking for in someone to help get us past those pain points? Especially thinking about sort of this post-COVID world where people had to restrict, figure things out, and now, it's 2024, 2025, 2026. They're looking to go back to something and still building what something means, right? Are we going to do the same things we did before? Are we going to stay in sort of this smaller post-COVID world, or are we looking to grow again? And so really having those conversations before you ever post the role is really, really important because that helps align everybody with, okay, that's where we were, but here's where we're going. And it helps move us into finding the next person. I think well, I'm going to talk about one more thing really quickly, Kara. Thinking about transition and succession plannings for a lot of these place-based partnerships, they are small, integrated organizations, and they often have sort of an internal person that applies for the role. So for those like transition and succession planning, especially for leaders who might have been there for 10 or 15 years, we just want to make sure that we're discussing what does it mean for when this person is no longer in this role, and if they have someone internal that they're thinking about moving into the role, how do they make sure that they're getting trained in all the areas that they need to be successful in this role? If fundraising is the most important part of the CEO role and the person hasn't fundraised, we need to make sure that we have built a plan in to make sure that they're going to be able to do all parts of the role successfully for the organization's success. So those are some of the big pieces that I've learned in leadership transition. So, Michelle, you can come off mute. So I'm going to be talking to Michelle in just a second, but we did a really interesting, fun CEO search about a year ago, last spring, with Renaissance West Community Initiative. They are a purpose-built community partner based in Charlotte, North Carolina. And they have over 1,300 residents and a really amazing model. There's mixed income housing. There was also a senior living center. They have a daycare on site. They have a elementary school on site. They have a life navigator program that was really about making sure that the community has their well-being. So they had like farmers markets, really, really cool, amazing things were happening in that community. And it was time for them to have a new CEO. So we were able to hop in and meet with a lot of external stakeholders, which I think for all of you purpose-based partners, we spoke to the community, we spoke with superintendents in the school, we spoke to a lot of different focus models who directly connected with Renaissance West on a daily basis and made sure that we heard from everybody about the importance of their work and what was needed to continue the community forward. So we can, Kara, go to the next one. And Michelle is on here. Michelle, I'm going to let you take a minute to introduce yourself.
Okay.
And then I
Well,
have a couple questions. Go ahead.
sounds good. I'm Michelle Elam. I'm one of the board members for Renaissance West Community Initiative. And I would say it was we had a great experience with Daniel's Talent organization. So it was a really great experience.
So just to start off with, Michelle, just tell me sort of how did you become part of Renaissance West's board?
Okay. I started out as because of my corporate role, HR executive for a corporate organization. I started representing that corporate organization. And then when transition occurred, the board chair and the vice chair asked me to stay on in a community capacity.
And how long have you been part of the board or
Since
working with it?
2023. Since May of
2023.
2023. Yes.
Okay, 3 years. And so, talk to me a little bit about prior to launching the search, what were some of the important discussions between the board, the search committee, you, and understanding like what the needs were for the organization?
So the first thing we did when we knew there was a need to recruit for a CEO, we created an ad hoc committee. And that was the hiring committee for RWCI. That's one of the things we did. And then we made sure that we had the right people on that committee. And when I say right, we needed someone who had the historical knowledge of RWCI. We needed the board chair. We needed someone with an HR background. We needed someone who fully understood this community, the stakeholders, and all those things. So we took that into consideration when we created that ad hoc committee. And then we wanted to make sure after creating that, we talked as a committee and we wanted to make sure we had someone strong in fundraising because we were having budget constraints. So we needed to build strong funding strategy to sustain operation. And then we wanted someone who was well known in Charlotte in the nonprofit sector, strong relationships with business partners and donors. We need to make sure of that. We also needed to make sure that candidate had experience with mixed income communities, credit to college education strategy, because as you stated earlier, and we have a child development center and we have a STEAM academy. And so we wanted someone who had that knowledge as well. And in addition to that, improving community well-being and economic vitality. And we also wanted someone who could come in. We had a strategic plan, but we knew there was some opportunity. So we needed someone to come in to be able to strengthen that strategic plan. We knew where we were. We knew where we wanted to go somewhat, and you all helped us with that. But we needed to know what were those gaps and who could help us close those gaps to get where we wanted to go.
So speaking of us, how did Daniel's Talent Solutions help sort of guide your search process and talk to me about what was critical to getting your successful outcome?
Okay. What was critical is some of the key things that you all did. First of all, we met, we had virtual meetings for the committee to introduce ourselves to you and your team. And then we had an in-person strategy session. That was the most critical part of this process. Bringing all the key players in, you guys were in person. We were able to interact. We were able to establish some key things, some key criterion that was definitely needed for us to hire the right candidate. So that was critical. Then you guys did a great job screening candidates. We got a lot of candidates, a lot of applicants in. So you guys did a great job presenting us with the applicants and helping us to pinpoint those key candidates. So that was great. You all did that. Schedule of the interviews, I mean, just and down to the offer. We knew that we needed to go back to the market and see what the market was for a CEO in the Charlotte area. And so we did all that. So you guys really, really helped us with that. And then I want to say, Yanika, you touched on this, the bias. We all come in with biases, but you all provided us with bias training. Me being in HR, I was accustomed to that, but my peers on the board were not. And so that was really, really helpful for the team to understand, get rid of your biases. And then the pre-interview prep, that was crucial for us. And then the interview guide based on information provided during the strategy session, you all just hit that out the park. That was great. And then the follow-up meetings, you all scheduled interviews and then we had follow-up meetings after the interviews. So all of those things allowed us to recruit and hire a CEO in less than 6 months.
How did you think about onboarding? So, we got through the search. How did you make sure that you were setting up the CEO for success and transition and then long term?
So the key thing that we looked at when we talked about onboarding, it would be key for that new CEO to come in and meet with their second in command, their direct reports. That was the first thing. And then after meeting with their direct reports, meeting with the full team, introducing him or herself to the full team. And then after that, that individual needed to meet the board chair first, direct reports, and then the full team. And then after that, meet with every board member, have a one-on-one with every board member, meet with stakeholders, meet with donors, past and present, making sure they got engaged in the community, met the residents. So it was very scheduled meetings with the principal at the STEAM Academy and the operator at the CDC. So it was very important for that relationship building. That was one of the key things out the gate. Let's focus on relationships first. Then it was, okay, assess the processes, the workflows, the culture, all those things to build an effective team, to build an effective organization. Then that was key for us as well.
Looking back on the search and the transition and the onboarding, what lessons learned, or is there anything that you would do differently today?
There's one thing I thought about this, Keisha, and I said there's one thing that for all those who are considering who will have to hire a CEO, fundraising is such a key part, but most organizations don't have it in their bylaws or those type things. What does that look like for the board? Establishing what the boards need to be doing, board members need to be donating, as well as how do they go out and get donors or get leads, those type things. And I don't think that's established in organizations. So if we had to do it all over again, I think that would have been a part of that recruiting process, making sure we discuss, ask candidates how in their current organization, how do they handle donors when it comes to the board and what the expectations are. That was the only thing. We had a great experience. Like I said, it didn't take a year, Yanika. It was less than 6 months, but Daniel's Talent Agency, they gave us one of the best experiences that I've ever been involved in, and I've been in other CEO recruiting processes. So they were absolutely amazing.
Thank you, Michelle. And I appreciate your thoughts on what you would do differently, because I think I've heard that before. You're not the first person who has said that of like what relationship is the board supposed to have with fundraising, especially if
Hmm.
we are depending on this one person. So I really appreciate you and your time and your
You're
perspective
welcome.
today.
Thank you for
Yanika,
the
I saw you.
opportunity.
I was gonna say there are two things because Michelle's being very modest. There's one thing that they did that I really respected, and this board was going through a transition. So
Yeah.
at the same time that they were hiring a CEO, they were going to have board members transitioning off of the board and new board members coming on, and this happens a lot in organizations. And so one of the things that we talked about with the hiring committee was what are their commitments to this hire? And this
Hmm.
it goes into onboarding, but the committee and this hiring team made a commitment to say, hey, we're gonna at least stay in place for
Hmm.
a certain amount of time to ensure that this CEO has the context. Michelle mentioned like the background and context of the organization, that they have more people to depend on, even though the board, a good amount of the board members were transitioning off.
Yeah.
So I will say that's something that I really admired about their committee was that they said, hey, what are we going to do to ensure this new CEO has a seamless process? Because we as a board have done our number of years, and so it's time for
Yes.
some more people to come in. So I do want to just highlight that that's also something that's really important.
Thank you, Unica.
Mhm.
Karen, you can move us along. And Yanika, I think,
Yeah.
oh, I don't think that, do you still want to?
Well, we have about 15 minutes. You let us know. We can jump into, I know this is a community, and so the idea was also for us to like at least get into breakout rooms, introduce ourselves, and maybe share at least one hiring strategy maybe that you've used in your organization that you really like. And so this will be quick. Maybe we can do, I don't know, Kara, maybe like 7 minutes. Is that too long? Maybe
I think
7
that's
minutes?
great. Yeah, I
Okay.
might just need to ask Alicia, who's also hosting with us, if she can help me with breakout rooms quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know we have a small group. So thank you, Bernice, who has to jump to another session. But this is also about sharing practices and learning from each other. And so I think we'll just jump into a quick breakout session. We won't do the 10 minutes. Introduce yourself, your organization, and maybe something that you and your organization has done that has been that you think is like really great to share with another group. We got two quick slides and then we will get you out of here. So we just wanted to reemphasize a couple of things. I know this will be one of our final points about kind of after the hire. But even the best leader will struggle without clear expectations, onboarding, and thinking about what type of coaching or support they need. So you've gone through this whole hiring process. You've already kind of identified where they might be stronger or where they might need some support. So are you, as a hiring manager, a board, providing the coaching and support when you've kind of seen a spot that needs additional help? Development, we all want to be developed in some type of way, and a healthy culture. Even if you're the person saying, hey, can you come in and help our org culture, right? Then they need some support there. And then so our last slide, wanted to just leave you with some key things. I think there's one more slide, Kara. Yep. All right. Takeaways. Leadership placement, it is one of the highest leverage decisions that your organization can make. We already showed you the data on that. And the cost of a bad hire extends beyond the salary. It's morale, it's lost opportunity that you can be putting resources somewhere else. Keisha and Michelle kind of talked about this a little bit, and especially it was Michelle was talking about they needed a fundraiser for the future. But not only thinking about right now, think about where you're going. And we sometimes talk about this in terms of age, right? So our place-based partner was 10 years old. Well, where do they now that they're gonna move into being a teenager? What do you need when you're at the teenage stage of being an organization versus when you were in the infancy stage of being an organization? And that looks different. There's a little bit more than the traditional leadership skills needed, especially as you all know, as place-based partners. And hiring is only the beginning. So making sure you're thinking about the other pieces, onboarding, retention, and development matter just as much. So thank y'all so much for the opportunity. I'm gonna turn it back over because I think there's a couple of more slides that Kara or Seema may end us out with.
Thank you all so much to Yanika and Keisha and Michelle for being with us and sharing their best practices today, and for the rest of the community for showing up and receiving these lessons and participating in breakout rooms as well. This officially concludes our Talent Well webinar series. So if you would like to continue being in touch or reach out to Daniel's Talent Solutions, please check out their website. We'll also be sharing their LinkedIn page, and you'll also receive a follow-up email with their contact should you like to do so. And for now, stay tuned. We'll likely have more future opportunities for the Talent Well community later this year, and we will definitely keep you all updated um, as promptly as we can. Have a great week. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank
Thanks for joining us.
you.
Great to see you.